Why, hello there, and welcome to this casual video. Today, I wanted to do kind of like a literary overview of 2020 for myself. And to be honest, I have tried filming this now a couple of times, but I found that I'm just always rambling, so I don't know how much I'm going to be covering here. But my plan was just to talk about like all the stuff that has happened in like the literary sense for myself last year, as well as my top 15. But who knows, I might make a separate video for the latter. So let's get right into it. Also, by the way, do you see this? This is my pumpkin. Yeah, So they've been gone from the channel for a couple of weeks now. I forgot to take them with me the first time I brought over my stuff. So my mom brought them last week and I'm very, very happy with that. But yes, my literary thoughts, things that have happened. So yeah, I'm going to try and get through this as fast as possible. So in January, I decided that I wanted to challenge myself a bit more with regards to reading outside of my comfort zone. I had been doing so a couple of years now, and I just wanted something extra to kind of like push me more. So I decided to join a bunch of reading challenges. I did the Year of the Asian Reading Challenge, the Con Sabor Challenge, which was Latin American literature, and what else? The Classics Reading Challenge, and also the Reading Women Challenge, which had like several prompts. And what else? It had several prompts, such as read a biography by a female athlete and stuff like that. And everything went quite well the first couple of months, but I ended up dropping everything, I think around August, September, just because it was such a pain. Like, I mean, wait, hear me out. It was such a pain, like documenting all of it and making videos around it and doing like video analysis of my reading habits and stuff like that. And at that point, I had already completed 2. I believe I had finished Yark and I had finished the Classics challenge. And I felt that I had already gotten a lot more than I had initially expected that I would get from joining all of these challenges. So it felt all right for me to kind of like say thank you very much, and I'll take it from here. And I think like the most impactful one was actually not the Year of the Asian Reading Challenge, but the Classics 2020 challenge. So this challenge meant that I would have to read 12 classics in 2020. So 1 book a month, which is fine. So at the start of 2020, I had also decided to just kind of like stop buying so many books, and so I just checked my bookcase for classics, because the idea of reading classics had always very much appealed to me, although I felt a bit threatened to be quite frank. So I thought this was a great challenge to try and kind of like overcome that quote unquote fear. So yeah, I picked them out and I made a video about the books that I had planned to read that year. So a couple of weeks later, someone commented under that video saying that they were looking at the participants of this challenge and that they were quite disappointed to see that not a lot of them had such a diverse selection of books. And so I started looking at my own, and I saw 1 Nigerian classic, 1 Japanese classic, 1 Dutch classic, and the other 9 were from the UK and US, mainly written by men. I think 11 books were written by men. I think I had one Jane Austen book. And that was kind of like shocking to me. I was legit like surprised, like, who, me? How could I've made this selection without realizing like how not diverse it was? And that kind of led me to challenge my idea of classics, because of course, I mean, I've grown up in the West, and so a lot of things I see from a Western point of view. And when you're looking at classics from a Western point of view, often the thing that you think of are books written by old white men and a couple of women such as Jane Austen and like the Bronte sisters and stuff like that. And I have to be honest, it was quite jarring to realize that and kind of like see classics in this new light, because I mean, here I am deciding to go for this challenge, and the only prerequisite for the selection are classics. So essentially, books that were written before the 1960s. So why is it that I like 80 or 90% of the books that I'm picking are written by white men? And yeah, that's kind of like when I started to really branch out, and I decided to break my book ban, which led to a whole other stuff. But yeah, that's when I started actively searching for classics outside of the Western canon. And that was honestly one of the best decisions that I had made last year on the literary side. Also, just in terms of like looking at the Western canon, like how narrow it is. Like, it isn't only just majority white men, it's majority like Western. I'm like, you have UK, US, a bit of French literature, a bit of German, and the Greek philosophers, and that's about it. And you can include a couple of Russian authors, such as Anton Chekhov and Tolstoy. So even that was very, very interesting to see, like how little attention or interest there is in, for instance, I don't know, Polish literature, Danish literature, what else have you in Europe, you know? And that's how truly kind of like my journey with regards to world literature, world classics really started. I found so many different, how do you call this in English? Stromingen. Here's the word. You had like negritude, magical realism from Latin America. Like, I knew that it existed, but actually reading works from that genre was just like so mind blowing. Like it was like a full blown experience. But yeah, I think I might even want to make a separate video with regards to classics in the future. If you're interested, do let me know, because I'm dragging on a bit. But yeah, that's one of the things that was very mind-opening for me. Then moving on to February, I hosted my first reading challenge, the Blacklit challenge, which is actually going on now, the second edition, the Blacklit challenge light. So yeah, it was just a month where I tried to help people out, or like kind of like push people towards trying to read more Black literature, but specifically Black literature that isn't mainstream. I mean, now when people talk about Black literature, it's like, yeah, read Angie Thomas and read Ta-Nehisi Coates, etc., etc. But like, there's just a plethora of Black literature out there that barely gets considered, and so I was hoping to really bring those to light during that month, and it was really really fun. I made a lot of fun videos. I found that I didn't prepare enough. So I was like rushing to make videos, rushing to get out content, so it was really stressful, and I ended up not really being able to participate like myself with the readathon. But it was fun to see so many people who were so excited about it. We got a feature in Fortune magazine online, which was also really awesome. That was really cool. So yeah, that was a fun experience as well. I think also that whole topic with regards to Black literature, I need to make a whole separate video about that, but we'll do that in like another discussion, chill, laid back, casual video. Then moving on, like after like March is when the pandemic hit here in the Netherlands. That was the time when you couldn't enter a supermarket and find any type of toilet paper. So that was kind of like a weird time. I feel like March and December, it has been an absolute blur. I can't really distinctively say what happened here or what happened there, but I think it has just been a year of reading a lot of classics, doing a lot of research into things, just being even more thorough with reviewing books. I definitely feel that I've gotten better with regards to reviewing books, and I find it, yeah, very interesting. Well, going back to I have to go back to the classics, I'm sorry, because it kind of like ties into how this channel has changed in that sense, the literary side of the channel, because I used to be very interested in contemporary literature, and I think that was highly influenced by the online book community. And one of the things that I noticed by doing both my like my book ban and getting more into classic literature is the way in which the novelty of books, like the newness, I don't know if novelty is the correct word for it, how that gets, I think, like sort of commodified almost within the online book community. Like the popularity of a book often depends on how new it is, and that also leads into the value that advanced reading copies have as well. And so it gets very easy to fall into that trap of quote unquote following the hype and trying to read or buy all the books that are out now and making videos super fast about them, because the discussion is now and things have to happen now. And I think that also that is kind of like a product, going off topic here, but I think that's also kind of something that has happened because of social media, how like the online community in general, globalization, how things are moving so fast, the way of life, and it's trickling down even into our literature, where everything is just fast, new, and it's kind of like jarring. It was jarring for me, kind of like taking a step back, because yeah, I could see it as a sort of, I sound so silly, I could see it as an outsider, but I could kind of like I was able to detach myself from those types of behaviors of like, and that type of pressure to continuously talk about the newest releases, etc. I was able to detach myself and really see like how how harmful it was for me with regards to my love for reading, because that really diminished because of my need, the need that I felt to go along with what was popular at the time. And so slowly I noticed that the feeling of FOMO started to disappear. The need of advanced reading copies and books in general started to disappear. And so I had kind of like for myself a mini renaissance, if you will, with regards to interest in literature, because the pieces that I was looking at had been read like for decades and even centuries some. And so there's a lot of information out there for me to find, and even though it's not like real-time communication, right, like discussing books with other people, I was able to find information that gave me insights on these pieces and helped me enrich my reading experience in that way. And being able to kind of like metabolize that information and putting it in format of a video and putting that out again for other people, in the hope that they will discover these pieces as well and have a good experience or an even better experience than mine. That feeling is just amazing for me. Did any of what I just did anything I just say make any sense? But yeah, it reading classics has made me so much happier, and it has made my relationship with regards to contemporary literature as well much better. I'm really not focused on what's coming out next Tuesday or anything like that. I'm just looking at, am I interested in this book, and like myself, rather than do I think I'm interested in this book because everyone else seems to be interested by this book, interested by this book. Was that a correct English sentence? Yeah, so that has helped as well a lot, and it has just given me like so many bangers in 2020, because even now, despite like things going kind of like downhill for myself personally in October, and I barely even read anything since then. Till now, I'm kind of still even in a reading slump. I was still able to find 15 books where I was like, damn, this stuff really slaps. You know? So it has been such a great experience. I also interviewed a bunch of authors, which is really interesting as well, kind of like getting to ask all these questions that I had with regards to how a book gets made and how the process is, and how just like the coolest stuff. That was really cool. There's lots and lots of hard work, of course, because you have to read you have to read the book, obviously, and then you have to try and find like meaningful questions and keep a conversation going. And I'm not the most social person out there, so that was really hard. I was nervous with every single interview and sweaty and stuff like that, and then I have to like go back and watch an hour of myself being awkward with all these awesome authors and try to make a video of it. I still have a couple of videos that I still need to edit, but yeah, it's just been a lot, but I'll get to it, and yeah, I'll get to it. What else was there to say? Yeah, October, we had Fortnight Frights. Like I was saying, October, lots and lots of stuff went down. So just to kind of like give a quick recap, in October I hosted Fortnight Frights, which is a horror themed readathon, which I created to, I guess, sort of, again, motivate people to read outside of their comfort zone, to get people into the horror genre, as well as trying to help people find horror literature from all over the world. And like when people talk about horror, it's often like Stephen King, maybe a bit of Grady Hendrix, if that's his name, Grady Hendrix, yeah, and Henry James and stuff like that, H.P. Lovecraft. And I really wanted to showcase that macabre literature exists almost everywhere. So I had planned so much, like I made reading journals, I made stickers, I had so many cool videos planned, but then life happened, and I don't want to go too much into it, but a week before the readathon happened, one of my friends who I got to know actually through like online literature stuff passed away. And it was the first time that I had a friend who was around my age pass away, and the experience was really traumatic, and I tried to get through it the first week of the readathon, but I couldn't do it. I had to give myself time to really grieve and process all of that. And so I had to cut things short for myself. So all kind of like the live events that I had the second week, I just all had to cancel them. And I just kind of like let the readathon go on the foundation that I had created for it. And luckily, everyone was so cool and so nice about it. So it's really, really appreciative of it, because at that time I made a video. It's privated now, but I made a video. I was like so distraught and so stressed out because I felt I always put so much pressure on myself, and I was just like crying, and I was like, guys, I'm sorry, it's not gonna happen. This happened, and I just can't do things anymore. And just the overflow of messages of just sheer kindness really helped me get through that entire period. And yeah, I just want to thank everyone who reached out during that time. It really meant a lot to me. It still means a lot to me. Honestly, it was a really rough period, and things aren't still okay, I guess. I mean, since then I think I might have read maybe three or four books, and the rest is manga. I've just had a lot on my brain, and that's okay. It's fine. It's I'm not trying to be hard on myself or anything. And also now with the Blacklit challenge, where everything is like super casual and it's just a simple point system, it's of course not what I had wanted the reading challenge to be, but these are hard times, and I think that's kind of fine. People go through these types of phases. I try not to feel bad about it. It's weird, of course, because I do really talk a lot about literature on this channel, so it's it's like, okay, now you read one book a month, but I still have so many books that I haven't spoken about on this channel that I literally have like a good 10 videos that I could still make about various books, this one being one of them. So having said that, let's get to the 15 books that I enjoyed the most in 2020. Okay, let me just open my computer. I don't know for like how long I have been going on. Also, by the way, I have like a 30 plus book wrap up just here in my notes. So if you're interested in me just going through 13 books and comics that I've read last year and just didn't review, do let me know if you want to see that video. Otherwise, I don't know, I'll just like chuck it away. Yes, okay, so these are my favorite books of 2020, and they are in no particular order. Also, if you do follow my channel, you've probably heard me mention a couple of these throughout my videos, so apologies for that. But okay, let's start. The first one is The Death of Vivek Oji. This was written by Kweke Mezi. I read this back in February. I actually did like a reading vlog during Black History Month, so I'll put a card or a link in the description box. So this book was actually inspired by Chronicles of a Death Foretold by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. And the cool thing is that, well, the interesting thing is that the book starts at the end. So it's set in Nigeria, and the first thing we find out is that the main character, Vivek, is dead. His mother finds him wrapped up in colorful cloth with his head bashed in front of her doorstep. And so we get taken through Vivek's life as they try and find their identity and their place in the world, as well as a bunch of other characters. And yeah, it kind of like leads up to Vivek's death. And it was a hard pill to swallow at the end. Like, I was deeply affected by this book, and it really took me a couple of days to actually wrap my mind around what exactly had happened. And I think it took me like two months or 3 months, maybe even more, to actually write a proper review. It's now on my channel, so link in the description box if you're interested. No spoilers in it as well, so if you are looking for me to convince you to read this book, then I would definitely recommend you watch that video. Moving on, The Street by Anne Petrie, and I read this with my Patreon book club. It's a African American classic, written at the start of the 1940s. It's actually Petrie's debut novel, and it's set in New York, Harlem. Is Harlem in New York? And yeah, it centers around this single black woman called, I think, Lutie Johnson. She has recently left her man, and now she is trying to just make a living for herself and provide for her son, and just, it's a struggle. It's an honest struggle, and the book really explores the hardships that Lutie goes through as a single black mother in Jim Crow America, 1940s, and it's a lot to take in, but it's so beautifully written. I would highly recommend this book to you. Till this day, I am so surprised that this is a debut novel. It's like 400 pages, but I blasted through it, and I'm a girl who loves her less than 200 pages books. Like, this book was so good, and also very heartbreaking. I think Tayari Jones, she wrote the foreword for the latest edition, and I think she said she's read this book about 8 times. So that already says a lot, but highly recommend. Also looking to read her other book. I think it's called Narrows or The Narrows, but yeah, I'll look into that. The third one is No Longer Human by Osamu Dazai. I did a review on that back in January last year. One of the first pieces of Japanese classic literature that I read. It was a dark trip, but weirdly enough, very relatable, if that makes any sense. It looks at like the darker part of the human condition, and it is written from the perspective of this man, I think called something Oba, Yozo Oba, I'm not too sure, but it's kind of like an autobiographical novel, if you will. A lot of the events that the main character goes through, that I himself went through, and yeah, this was, I think, the first book that I read and did like thorough like research for. Also because Junji Ito, one of my favorite mangakas, made an adaptation and it came out that same month, and I read them back to back, which was also a very interesting experience. But yeah, that was kind of like the point where I was like, whoa, I think this is really cool, being able to do so much research and reading a book from a completely different culture than what I've grown up in, and having to do so much research and finding all these small tidbits and stuff, and being able to kind of like make a quote unquote video essay essentially. That was really cool. That was really awesome for me. So yeah, it's a very dark book, but it was one of my favorites. And like I said, I've done a video essay, a video review of it, so I'll leave a link to that in the description box as well. Then The Aleph and Other Stories by Jorge, shoot, how do you pronounce Spanish letters again? I am always confused. The J is an H, right? No? Wait.
Jorge Luis Borges.
Yeah, hola, Jesus. Jorge Luis Borges. Yes, so yeah, so I read The Aleph and Other Stories by Jorge Luis Borges, and this is one of the greats of Latin American literature. He was from Argentina, and he was mainly known for writing short stories, and that's exactly what The Aleph and Other Stories are. It's a collection of The Aleph, and then I think a collection called The Museum and The Maker. And a lot of times when people talk about Borges, it's like 9 out of 10 times it's like, this man is amazing, this man was a genius, the stories are amazing. And I definitely agree with that sentiment. However, I felt so dumb. I felt so dumb reading these stories. Because here you have this dude, Borges. He read so much in his lifetime. This dude was a genius. Like, the amount of like influences this man's work have, like, there's like Islam, Christianity, philosophy, mathematics, there's so much physics, there's so much stuff in there that if you are not familiar with, one, Latin American history, and two, a lot of the literature that he read in his time, you are going to have a hard time understanding a lot of his work. And so I struggled so much with this collection. I was reading this with my patron book club, and luckily we had each other for support, because it was really, really hard to understand the stories, and I found myself having to read a lot of things over and over again as well. There were also loads of long sentences, which never expected that those would be a struggle for me, but they were. But afterwards, like, I think you have to really commit to Borges to eventually be able to understand what he's trying to do, or what he tried to do with his literature, the way stories are composed. And so after some time, I started to get used to it. I started to see the light, and I was absolutely amazed. Like, you had so many stories that were so incredibly trippy, like had so many different interpretations, as well as like, can you imagine like someone trying to describe or explore infinity in terms of literature? Like, infinity, in the concept of maths already is already kind of like big brain for me, you know. So having that in literature, and seeing it from such another perspective, as someone who studies maths, was really, really interesting, and also very mentally heavy to take on, but nevertheless very cool. And so despite it, me having like so much difficulties actually understanding his work, I have such a huge admiration and appreciation for his work, and I am definitely looking forward to reading more of it. And yeah, also hopefully in the future being able to actually explain a bit more, because there's not a lot of videos about Borges on YouTube, for at least for the English speaking crowd, that really kind of like dissect his work, except for like some lectures, you know, but not kind of like casual videos. So I'm hoping to do that in the future. Yeah, so moving on, I have Earthlings by Sayaka Murata. I actually did a review for that a couple of weeks ago, so I won't talk too much about it. But Murata is one of my favorite authors out there. I read Convenience Store Woman like 2 or 3 years ago, which dealt with kind of like the same themes as Earthlings. So a lot of Murata's work centers around women within Japanese society, who don't conform to what is deemed sort of acceptable within their society. And for a country like Japan, where conformity is very important, it's interesting to see an author explore what happens when a person doesn't conform. And Convenience Store and Earthlings are, I don't know how to say this in English, like two faces of the same coin. Like, one is like a nice kind of like light introduction to the theme, and that is Convenience Store Woman. And then you have Earthlings, and that just dials everything like up to like 100%. And it was a great, it's hard to say that it's a great experience, because it was really it was very intense. I think that's the word to say, intense. And I appreciated the work a lot. So if you're interested in knowing more about that, put a link in the description box to the review. Okay, moving on. We have These Ghosts Are Family by Macy Card, and this is a sort of short story collection, I would say, that centers around a Jamaican family, part of which has actually migrated to America. And it follows this family throughout generations, and shifting from perspective, from time errors, literally everything. And this was so good. It was such a good book, and the stories were so unique. Like, you had one book that was written from the you perspective, another that was like a sort of like a horror story. There was like a lot packed in this book, and it all came together so beautifully. And I also had the amazing opportunity to actually speak to the author, to Card, about the book. and it was an amazing experience. I got to ask all of the questions that I had, and if you're interested in that, there's a link in the doobly-doo in the description box. Yeah. Moving on, we have Revenge by Yoko Ogawa. Also a short story collection. I'm starting to find, now that I'm looking at my selection of books, I see that there are quite a lot of short story collections in here. I do love a short story, you know. Anyway, Revenge by Yoko Ogawa. I actually read her book, The Memory Police, I think about a year ago or something, and that one was about like objects disappearing on this mysterious island, or like this mysterious country in which people lived. And like, for instance, the object perfume would disappear, and then the concept of perfume would disappear from everyone's mind, and they wouldn't know what perfume was, what, like, how it smells, anything like that. Very trippy book, but not really my flavor. Nevertheless, I was knitting one day during quarantine, and I found that there was an audiobook for Revenge, and I tried it out, and this was so good. This was so good. It was a short story collection filled with weird, creepy horror stories that were all connected, and the fact that they were connected, and that you could see like all these stories intertwining, and characters showing up in different stories, and it all coming together. This was like, honestly, top 5 for me. This was so good, and I am going to be reading this again this year. I have to. I need like, I've come to the point where now I only want to have books to hold on to that I absolutely love, and Revenge is one of those. So good. Highly recommend. I don't think I've actually really spoken much about this book, but it's top tier. If you are a horror fan, go read this. Same with Japanese Tales of Mystery and Imagination by Edogawa Rampo. I've spoken too many times about this book. Again, it's a short story collection, this time written by sort of the father of Japanese mystery writing. It was really interesting. Also particularly fun for me to read because one of my favorite mangakas, Junji Ito, was heavily inspired by Edogawa Rampo as well. And he's adapted a couple of his stories too, like The Human Chair. So I do have to give a note with this one. There were about 2 stories in here that did feature ableism, especially this one story about a war hero who lost both of his legs and both of his arms, and he just gets treated awfully. Like, the entire story was just awful. And I think this is one of the things that I'm now encountering more often now that I'm reading classic literature, because I'm reading literature written like from a different culture and a different era, because this book, it was written I think in the 1920s or so, and so it's really hard, kind of like, how do you, like, I think I've discussed this, my whole entire dilemma in my problematic authors video, because even like in terms of racism, most of the literature written before the 21st century, and I reckon even now still, contains quite a lot of racism. And it's like, how do you read that? And how do you say like, okay, I think this is a good literature, and how do you deal with like the problematic parts of literature, or the things that do not align again with the morality of society as it is. at the moment, because I reckon that in 100 years from now, a lot of stuff that we are doing now at the moment is going to be seen in a very negative light, because that's kind of like how history works, right? I mean, people in the present time always think like, oh, we know the best, and we are smarter than the people who came 50, 100 years, 200 years before us. But every single time we still find something that is very uncomfortable, very problematic, and very harmful to a lot of people. So yeah, even now, after having made that story, I think over a year now, I still am not sure what like the best practice is when it comes to that. But I think one of the most important things is just acknowledging it as well, and maybe just kind of like having a discussion about it. I mean, that's literature, right? I mean, we take a piece of written text and we discuss it, we view it from our point of view, of course, and we try to look from other perspectives as well. And yeah, I think that like having dialogues is always like the most important thing. And I think, yeah, classic literature is an absolutely great venue to do that, especially from a historical point of view. Then we have When We Cease to Understand the World by Benjamin Labatut, and this is a piece of Chilean contemporary literature. I've spoken about this in a wrap-up, I think, several months ago, and this centers around scientists, mainly Germanophone scientists like Grothendieck, Fritz Haber, and a bunch of other people I can't think of at the moment. But yeah, I've actually written a single review video for that book. It's like one of my favorites. That's why it's on the list, right? And it's just written so well. I've never seen fiction and non-fiction merge so well, because the book is centered around their discoveries and parts of their lives, and also I think the impact, mainly actually the impact that their discoveries have had, and sometimes also the way in which these scientists reckon with the consequences of their discoveries. Like, for instance, this book, I believe, starts off with the discovery of cyanide, and it takes this route through like different discoveries and eventually leads up to like mustard gas during the First World War and like the consequences that had. And yeah, it's just beautifully written, and it's a real conversation starter. Oh gosh, I hate that word, but I mean, I hope you understand what I mean. It brings up a lot of interesting topics with regards to science and ethics and consequences of scientific discoveries. And then I have at the number 10, or like the 10th book that I want to discuss, is Miss Isandrid by Miyako Kawakami. Really going to be really concise because I've spoken too much about this book. It's like a novella about this little boy who is obsessed with the woman who makes ice sandwiches in who makes ice sandwiches at his local supermarket. And yeah, the book centers around this boy being obsessed with her, but really the main theme, in my opinion, was the loss of innocence that comes with growing up and discovering this world as a kid. And I just think that that's just such a powerful thing to explore. So well done, Kawakami, on this book, because it really hit me hard. Then moving on, we have Ormeshadow by Priya Sharma, and this is a novella, again, And this is actually a coming of age sort of like urban fantasy or some like, could you call it fantasy? Yeah, I would say like speculative fiction sort of something. It's a coming of age story. I don't think I've actually reviewed this on my channel. I think on my Instagram I did like a short post on it. I'm not too familiar anymore with the particulars of this story, but yeah, it's about this boy who lives, I think like the story is set in the UK around like 19th, early 20th century, and it's about this boy whose father is a professor. His father gets fired for something, and so they move back to his father's farm where his father grew up, and so they start to live alongside the father's brother's family. Like, you have two brothers with their families living on this farm, and this book is really about family dynamics and families falling apart and this boy coming of age. It was I'm not doing a good job of summarizing this, but I don't know, something really struck a chord with me with this book, and yeah, I hope that more people would pick it up because I thought it was a good story. Then we have another Japanese book, a classic, Kokoro by Natsume Soseki, another book that I did thorough research for. It was just such a fun experience. I had such a good time learning about the book, also because Natsume Soseki was one of the first novelists of Japan, and so he's had a huge influence on Japanese literature. And he is also, I think Kokoro, the book that I read, is the best-selling book in Japan. I think the number one best-selling. I think, yeah. Not too sure. Either number one or number two. It's between No Longer Human and Kokoro, but very interesting, and would highly recommend if you're interested in learning about contemporary Japanese society, because this man is kind of like a product of the Meiji era, which had a huge influence on Japanese society. Would highly recommend for you to watch that video if you're really interested. I put a lot of historical context in the video, so it will all make sense what I'm saying at this moment. Anyway, just to give you a short summary, the story is split up in 3 parts. It centers around this student who finds his mentor on a day out swimming somewhere on the Japanese coastline, and this student really looks up to this man, but the man has kind of like this darkness, this sort of secret melancholy, this type of like really sad atmosphere to him. And so the student is really interested in how he became the man he became. And so the first 2 parts center around the student, his relationship with his sensei, his teacher, who he calls the mentor, who he calls sensei. And the second part is he's studying in Tokyo, but he's actually from rural Japan, so he goes back. And so you see this contrast between old Japan and new Japan. And so in the second part, the student is just at his parents' place, and so we learn about that stuff. And then the third part is the sensei, his teacher, explaining why he is the man that he is. Fascinating, absolutely fascinating. Then number 13, we have Chronicle of a Death Foretold by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. Obviously I had to read this because the Death of Vivek Oji was inspired by this. Phenomenal book. It's a novella. Please read this. Like, you can read this in a day. Like an audiobook, I think in audiobook terms it might be like 2 hours. This was so good. Again, the same type of structure as the Death of Vivek Oji, we know that this guy is dead at the start of the story. He's killed by a pair of twins, and so the peculiar thing about this murder is that essentially the entire town knew that it was going to happen, but nobody prevented it. And so several years later, the narrator of the story goes back to the town and he interviews people trying to find out why exactly this guy died. And whew, gosh, this, like, I was sitting at the edge of my seat and I knew what was going to happen at the end. I was like, wow, it takes so much skill as an author to write an enthralling story despite like having spoiled themselves at the beginning. It was so good. Highly recommend. If you haven't read anything from Latin America, read this. It's so good. Highly recommend. Like, my brain couldn't compute with the end. I was like, but he's not gonna die, right? When I already knew he was dead from the start. It was intense. And then number 14. Wait a minute. Did I just lie? Was this entire video a lie? I only have 14 books. Well, it's okay. If you follow my channel, you'll know which books I enjoy. Because, like, in the end, right, I read a lot of books. At least I used to. And the thing is that what ends up on the channel are books I think are worth discussing. If I don't like a book, you'll probably never even see it on my channel. Maybe an Instagram post or story at most, but I don't think much more than that, just because at the start of kind of like making videos with regards to literature, I tried reviewing books that I didn't like, and the experience was horrible. I don't like talking about stuff I don't like. Like, I remember when I started, there was this one YA sci-fi book that I read, which was awful, absolutely atrocious. And I read through it nonetheless, hated it, wrote the review, hated it, filmed the review, hated it, and then during editing, I was like, okay, here's where I'm drawing the line. I can't do this. It's too much. It was, and I just gave up midway because I find no joy in talking about bad literature. So yeah, I don't know. Well, what was I trying to say? Something about the missing 15th book. You'll find it somewhere on my channel. Anyway, number 14 is Childhood by Tove Ditlevsen. Also, I do have to say, like, one of my friends reads a lot as well, and I told her to try out Childhood, and so she read the Dutch translation, which had just come out. And I was like hyping this book up. I was like, oh my gosh, it's so nice, like, it's so poetic. And she was like, I hated it. And funny enough, like, I thought it was just the funniest thing. I don't know, for some reason, just the fact that she was like, I could not get past like the first 15 pages. It's just hilarious. Like, I'm always kind of like scared, like, oh, what if like my friends don't like the books that I don't like? Like, does that mean I have bad taste? But I mean, it's just like, what's even good or bad taste? But yeah, I don't know. I just thought that was really funny. We had a good laugh together. But yes, Childhood. I think it's an amazing book. I did a review on it. It's the first part of a like trilogy of a trilogy. And it's a memoir, essentially. I think it's the parts are childhood, youth, and dependency. And they were written by Tove Ditlevsen, who was a Danish poet. And childhood centers around her childhood growing up lower class in Denmark during like the mid 20th century, I believe. And first of all, I thought it was like thoroughly interesting getting to know what society was like in Denmark during that time, because I think when we think about Scandinavia, at least our point of view here in the Netherlands, at least as a Dutch person, it's kind of like, whoa, Scandinavia is the country that's got everything to, like, are the set of countries, the set of countries that have just got everything together: childcare, education, healthcare, everything, and everyone just lives like a high quality life. And then being able to go several decades back and seeing what it was like for a lower class citizen in the capital of Denmark. Did I say Copenhagen at the start? I don't know, but I'm getting tired here. I've been talking for more than an hour now. But yeah, just growing up in Copenhagen within the lower class, what it was like as a woman, the opportunities that you had at the time as a woman was really, really interesting for me. And besides that, Didlif's an absolute sorceress when it comes to words. But I mean, it's kind of expected from poets. I find that I enjoy fiction from poets a lot, just due to the care with which their words are chosen. Not to say that, like, you know, novelists aren't good at picking words, but that you notice when a poet is writing fiction, and it shines through even in the translation. Like like I've said already, I've done a review on this, and I read a couple of passages, and the way this memoir felt like fiction, it was so beautifully written. And I really just need to get to the other two parts, so hopefully I'll be able to do that this year. Okay, I think that's about everything. Like I said in this video, I've been going off of tangents throughout, but I think, yeah, there are a lot of things that I still would like to discuss in this kind of like casual setup. So who knows, I'll get to that maybe soon. We'll see. Anyway, if you're still here after this long, thank you so much for watching. If you like the content that I make, perhaps consider joining my Patreon, or perhaps give me a coffee. You can also just support me by liking, subscribing, hitting that bell notification, and commenting, which just helps a lot as well. So yeah, thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you in another video. I'm done.